My grace is sufficient for you, God said to Apostle Paul, despite experiencing what he called a thorn in his flesh, an angel of Satan which he considered a stumbling block. One would think that God would take away the thorn for him to be more effective in his ministry, but he didn't. Instead, he gave Paul sufficient grace. Many times as Christians, we find it difficult to reconcile why God, who calls us to himself, would let us go through struggles, even when we are trying to be Christians in our society. The truth is that being a Christian doesn't imply a life on earth without struggles. It doesn't imply that the good news of the risen Lord, which changes history and humanity, will be easily welcomed by every ear that hears it. Neither does it imply an ease on our own path, because we too, who carry the message, are challenged by the very message that we bring to others. So I invite you to identify your own thorn and to listen to what God is saying about it. We are sure of one thing: whatever your thorn is, God's grace is sufficient for you. When we respond to God's grace, it has the power to transform our thorns and our struggles into instruments for spreading the gospel, so that people can look at us in our struggles and still see in us the joy of the gospel. They will see that we have hope in something so great that focusing on our thorns rather than the grace we have received and the glory that awaits us is not worth it. Similar to St. Paul, the thorn Jesus experienced in today's gospel is not being recognized among his people, despite having spoken with great wisdom. He was met with contempt and dishonor. Is this not the carpenter's son? They asked. Is not his mother called Mary, and his brethren James and Simon and Judas? I would like to point out that the names mentioned are not siblings of Jesus. In Jewish culture, as in Middle Eastern and African cultures, for instance, there are no words for a cousin, nephew, or a niece, as we have in the English language. Those mentioned, and even the unnamed sisters of Jesus, are all his cousins and relatives. Some of them were properly identified in Matthew 27 verse 55 to 57, which reads, "Many women were there watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons." The Mary mentioned as the mother of James and Joseph is further identified as a relative of Mary, the mother of Jesus, in John 19, verse 25. It reads, "But standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Cleophas, and Mary Magdalene." So these Marys were relatives and their children were cousins. But to an outsider, they are brothers and sisters, just as in my Igbo culture of southeastern Nigeria. So Jesus was met with dishonor by the people who knew him. Yet his thorn did not stop him from making the glory of God manifest in the lives of the few who believed in him. How many times do we not value those God has placed in our lives as gifts to us? And how often are we victims of such treatment by others? We need to keep in mind that God has given us sufficient grace, enough to lead to our salvation. And all that we need is to recognize it and respond to that very grace. May the Lord bless his words in our hearts. Amen.